Greetings, music makers. Welcome to the first episode of Git Tales. We are going to use this first video as kind of an intro of what you can expect to see on this channel. Kind of an overview of the channel over the next, let's say, coming months. We are going to using this as a space to talk about not the whys, not the hows of making an app, but specifically an Android application, but an investigation into the whys of our decision making while we do that. How we can move from design into developing a system that can be updated as the design updates, that keeps true to the information we want to be providing the user with access to. The question of why we make the app. And then, of course, the actual execution in the code. How do we apply a lot of these same principles of keeping our thoughts modularly oriented, object oriented, solid principles we'll be going over a few times. And at the same time, you'll also be seeing quite a bit of functional programming once we get to the back end of the app, if we get to the back end of this app. You'll be seeing a good bit of material design considerations, which are becoming very popular standard for the web and mobile, Apple and Android. And you'll also get to see some work with Dagger 2 specifically. And for those of you who are familiar with Git histories, that will be the main content, video content of this channel. Will be us going through heavily optimized Git histories, see what the again, the reasons why we pick the patterns that we pick and how we use them inside of our applications. I think that this is just as important as having your framework well researched, is getting all of your parts working in a way that's consistent with the use case you're expecting and the data that you'll be using. So let's get started. The app we're going to be creating is based on an idea from AVE. I may link to it. And it is an idea for a kind of a make your own shape portable section cutter. You put make a keyhole out of a glass pane or a piece of metal, depending on what kind of cutter you have at the tip of it. And this allows for kind of a on-the-spot CNC work. It is the machine is nice and simple. It is a stepper motor is moving a long arm around, and on that arm is another motor, which is moving a writing arm back and forth across the surface. The two controls then, the controls, as you can see for this, are going to be attached to the thing that actually attaches it to the face it's about to cut, the turning on the cutter, and then a polar coordinate system that has to be navigated. It's that polar coordinate system that the app has to be really concerned with, kind of providing the user with a library of shapes they can use in order that will be translated into this polar coordinate system and given as commands to this cutting device. The diagram, and I guess at this point we can bring ourselves to the drawing board. Looks then like this. It will be a arm here, looking down from the top, some sort of foot that holds onto it, so a footprint of some sort that holds onto the metal below it. And from this axis, another arm that comes out like so. And moves the drawing arm, which is going into the paper, normal to the plane of this paper. And this pivot arm can move this drawing arm this way and that way. So the app for this should have probably a set of shapes, probably in a gallery, the typical gallery setup, where there are images of the objects stacked up as such. And naturally, clicking on one of these is going to bring us to a detail window. And in this detail window, we will have a square at the top in which the display for this shape will be. I'll get back to why I chose a square for this space. And then room for controls down here. So one will be able to pick out these different images and edit them in this space right here. So before we get further into questions about the design process, or further into questions in the design process, we see this is generally what will be needed. Of course, this will allow for before we get further into the design process, we should, and specifying really the nuts and bolts of this, we should list what requirements this will have. Why should one be seeing this in the detail? And that is going to be for the editing of the data inside these different patterns the person is selecting. Let's say this one is just like a traditional bore. Maybe this one is a hard square. Maybe this is what we call a rounded rect. And maybe there's a triangle piece. The user should be able to scale this, absolutely, moving it from, let's say, a 5-inch by 2-inch triangle and move it to a 4-inch by 10-inch really easily. So scale is one. Changing the scale by dimension is also another. Changing this from a 5x2 to a 5x5 or 2x2. So also relative Cartesian dimensions. And the user should also be able to rotate this. This is for each image. And lastly, the user should also have a way to remember where they were last and store different configurations for this. So some sort of storage. Storage permutation selection. Indeed. This app, outside of just these objects, the app itself also should have the ability to write new shapes